When I told someone I was going to see a movie called Civil War, their response was, "Is that a new Marvel movie?" Proving two things to me. Few people know or care what Marvel is up to, and this movie should have had a different title. Civil War had a good trailer, though it was a misleading one. Its bold name brings with it preconceived notions based on the current political landscape, but Civil War is a road trip movie more than it is a war movie. A small crew of hip journalists cruise out to the droning and rambunctious music of New York duo Suicide as they embark upon an odyssey to the White House for a chance to interview the president, who is on his third term and has dissolved the FBI. But it's not the January 6th metaphor that it sounds like. The political parties are split into the Loyalists and the rebellious Western forces. California and Texas have seceded and formed a loose alliance, which will likely fall apart shortly after the credits roll. It purposely doesn't fit into a red versus blue dichotomy. The most ubiquitous comment is that an alliance between California and Texas doesn't make any sense. It reveals an inability to see past our current binary. The movie isn't interested in explaining what has occurred to create such a situation. It's not out of the realm of the imagination that paradigm shifts in culture and technology might cause migration between states, which could change the political landscape. Nick Offerman's president, who doesn't even have a name, is nondescript enough to represent any political figure you don't agree with. He is compared to Mussolini, Gaddafi, and Ceausescu, all fascist dictators who have been deposed and executed, but his specific stance on hot-button issues remains ambiguous. The president's garbled rhetoric is heard on the radio, but he's only seen at the beginning and end of the film. It's a unique casting decision, as Offerman isn't known for playing villains, but the opposing Western forces aren't exactly heroes either. It's a war like all other wars. People are immolated, and mass graves are dug for civilians. Two snipers sit outside of a house like Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They don't know who they're shooting at, only that they're being shot at and must shoot back. It's essentially the history of mankind. Writer and director Alex Garland has gone with a personal story rather than a political one, focusing on the brutality and absurdity of the human condition. The protagonist, played by Kirsten Dunst, is Lee, a world-weary photojournalist who suffers from PTSD from her time covering atrocities. Civil War is a movie concerned with memory, the act of capturing an image, and its effect on the human mind. Instead of pointing and shooting with a gun, photojournalists use a camera, but it transforms them just the same. The portrayal of journalism is a cynical one. The ability to take a picture gives one power which can be exploitative. Taking a photograph of someone else's death as it occurs implicates the witness in the act. Life is stolen rather than saved, as the journalists have done nothing to end the war. Joel, played by Wagner Moura, is an adrenaline junkie, chasing the high of battle without participating in the fighting. Lee is more contemplative about her place in the war. As our characters traverse a small town ignorant of the gravity of the situation, it's understood that journalism is necessary as a conduit for information, but Lee is losing faith in her calling. A mentor character, Sammy, played by Stephen McKinley Henderson, is brought on the trip along with a young reckless fan of Lee's named Jesse, played by Kaylee Spaney. Sammy and Lee are wise, ethical characters, while Joel and Jesse are naive thrill-seekers who endanger themselves and others for glory. There is a balance in these four characters, which has spiraled out of control by the end of the story. Jesse Plemons isn't a major character, though he conjures up the sinister energy he embodied while playing Todd in Breaking Bad, and steals the only scene that he's in. Director of photography Rob Hardy, who has shot all of Garland's movies, utilizes a shallow depth of focus to disorient as he did previously in Men. In one scene, the background is so out of focus that sparkling water behind the characters appears like an abstract hallucination. Extreme close-ups during intimate scenes complement the dramatic performances. The piercing sound design might actually be the strongest element. The gunshots signify an awakening into reality after more subdued scenes in which the characters bond. At just under 2 hours, Civil War doesn't dive deep into its lore of dystopian Americana, but it doesn't outstay its welcome either. Even though the journey is a meandering one, the pacing is tight. The lulls in the plot contain quiet character moments which provide respite from the deafening gunshots and panic of the battlefield, though I would hesitate to call Civil War an action movie. Garland is engaging in a conflicted self-reflection. He has created a movie called Civil War, released in a divided country during a contentious election year, and refuses to engage in political discourse in the movie.
If you were to talk to me about free markets or taxation or things like that, I would be left of centre for sure. But what I've realised is that mainly what I am is a centrist.
Despite a vague reference to the Antifa massacre, Garland isn't choosing sides or creating rhetoric. He is like the journalist providing a spectacle for an audience, while also turning inward and making a movie about being a spectator. In a modern civil war, civilians would all be journalists, as we carry cameras on us everywhere we go. Would we document sorrow to enact social change, or for the purpose of fame and personal gain? This is the ethical question of the movie. It's a difficult balancing act to maintain awareness of the horrific nature of war, while also satisfying mass audiences who are looking for something more like a live-action Call of Duty campaign. Based on the title, viewers were expecting an epic story about the machinations of war, imbued with current-day politics, though what is on display is a more broad reflection of our fascination with the grotesque. It's a fitting theme for Garland, whose previous movie ended with a man giving birth to himself in an infinite cycle. As James Joyce famously wrote in Ulysses, "History is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake."
You watch. Soon as DC falls, they'll turn on each other.
Civil War is concerned with the rise of fascism, which is a far-right ideology, so Garland isn't entirely sitting on the fence. As a British filmmaker, he is approaching the subject matter as an outsider, though my biggest issue is not with the movie's lack of complexity, but the use of AI imagery in the marketing of the film, confirmed by The Hollywood Reporter. The posters don't accurately represent the movie, but more importantly, work which would have once been commissioned to an artist is produced by an algorithm, which reappropriates existing images scrubbed from the internet. Fair use can be a protective measure for artists when copyrighted material has been transformed or recontextualized, but advancements in AI are challenging existing practices. AI can be used as a tool to assist artists, but completely bypassing the human element removes the transcendent quality of great art, reducing it to mere content. It's a shame A24 allowed this to happen, though it's part of a much more complicated issue which could reshape our entire society. The irony is that Garland's debut feature, Ex Machina, warned against this kind of reliance on artificial intelligence, which is now being used to promote his work. Unsavory marketing tactics aside, Civil War may not be Garland's deepest movie, but it is his most accessible one to date.